Hello, nerds for Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, is and true. Come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds. Nerds for Humanity. Formerly Nerds for Yang. We are going to do a Corona Data Palooza deep dive. So get ready. Put on your seatbelts. A lot of numbers. A lot of charts. Everything that mainstream America loves. Facts, logic, data. If only Iowa and New Hampshire did not screw the Yang Gang. But at any rate, we're here. Let's get ready for some data. I'm already calm. Already calm with the little data gong. Okay, so why don't we just say hi to people? Where are you guys joining us from? Ooh, Dina Manrique is joining us from the Philippines. Hello, Dino. I presume across Canada is in Canada. Caleb, you like that data gong? I do too. Minnesota, the great state of Michigan, crucial state of Michigan. Deutschland, Colorado Springs. All right. Well, welcome, guys. Portland, Oregon. If you are in the District 1, please support Heidi Briones. Speaking of which, guys, she is from Seattle. Go Hawks. Yeah, speaking of which, I want to tell you before we get started on the data, I have quite a lineup coming up, if I do say so myself. And in particular, there's a show that's coming up that I think you're going to really enjoy. And let me see if I can find, yeah, here it is. Upcoming live streams. Let me just show you some power. Some power on the Nerds channel. I think it's here. Okay. So we've got David Kim in a couple of days this weekend. We've got Tully. We've got Roberto Blake next weekend. And then on April 25th, this is some serious horsepower here. We have Heidi, Herzog, Johnson, and Breuer on the same panel. I cannot wait to do that interview. I think I'm going to talk about, ask them to talk about their values, their own unique style of leadership, what makes them tick. Then we'll go into the state of their respective campaigns and we'll talk about current events. So, any rate, that's coming up. So make sure you subscribe, set your reminder for that one, like it. And with that, let's get on to the data for Corona, because that's what you guys came here for. Let's start with our first chart. All right. Let's see here. Is it this one? No. Hold on. This one. Yeah, let's look at that one. Share screen. Okay, this is a New York Times coronavirus tracking map. So as of this stream, which is April 9th, 9 p.m. Central European Time, So I think that's probably like noon Pacific right now. We have 1.5 million worldwide cases and 91,000 worldwide deaths. If you look at total cases, most of them are in the US, followed by Italy, Spain, and then the UK. Although Iran is ahead of the UK. But if you look here, it's like, where isn't there corona? It's pretty much, there was a time where some people were saying, oh, in warmer parts of the planet, or the southern hemisphere, corona cannot survive. And as you can see, South Africa, Chile, Australia, they all have multi-thousand cases. And then here's where the cases are growing the fastest. So if you look at this map here, the darker the color, the faster the growth rate. So obviously, wow, Belarus is doubling every 3 days. Peru is doubling every 4.5 days. India doubling every 4.5 days. Russia doubling every 4.5 days. US is doubling every week. Right now, there's 449,000 cases. So a week from now, US may be over 1 million if you grow at the same rate as we have the last 7 days. So that's kind of interesting. Where is it growing slower? Like Germany, it's doubling every 11.5 days. Sweden, 10. Spain, their lockdown seems to have worked because now it's only doubling every 14.5 days. Italy, every 21 days. They've really started to get it under control. Switzerland, every 18 days. So the US is every 7. So we're growing faster than a lot of the world, but not quite as fast as Niger and Peru and Russia and India. Obviously, I think in the US, we'd wish we were closer to, let's say Greece or France, Germany, Austria, every 27 days. So there's hope there. There are countries that have been able to bend that curve down. And then here you can see how that growth rate has changed over time. So in late March, the US was really, really growing faster. But if you look here on the right-hand side of this bar chart, you can see that our color is getting lighter, which is exactly what we want. Basically, you kind of peak, and then it comes down. Here we had a second wave, peaked, now it's come down. Germany, peaked, come down, peaked, and now it's coming down. If you believe China's numbers, they've really gotten it tamped down. UK is interesting in that you see several bands of this orange, meaning they really haven't been able to wrestle it down completely. So obviously for the US, we're still going through our second wave. The early one was early Jan. This is probably when it would all happen in Seattle. And then here is probably, the tri-state area, New York stuff. Hopefully it doesn't, we don't have a third wave the way, let's say, the UK had a third wave. And hopefully, let's see. Look, South Korea had a bit of a third wave, but then they really have had it really tamped down. This goes from January to April. So this is about late January, April. So you got Feb, March, It's only an 8-week period, this bar chart. So in that 8-week period, you see many countries have had multiple waves. But very few of them are still in their peak, except Belarus. Very few of them have that bright orange, that dark orange all the way to the right. Oh, Cameroon. Most of them, Niger. Yeah. So, but most countries, most large countries, if you go by number of cases, might be coming out of the woods. So, fingers crossed. I think a lot of this comes down to how hardcore you are with locking down the country and, taking social distancing ultra seriously. So that's that chart. Let me see if I wanted to show you something else from this one. Oh, here, newly reported cases by day across the world. So still growing, but not growing as much as, let's say, it was in the end of March. Seems like if you look closely, you can almost see that it kind of is starting to flatten there in terms of worldwide cases. And deaths, well, that's a lagging indicator. And in fact, there was a record number of deaths just a couple days ago. But I think new cases is probably a more interesting one. One thing we should note with this new case stuff is that it is limited to how many people that we've tested. So if we're not testing, we're not going to know there are a lot of new cases. And we'll get into that in terms of US test levels in a little bit. That's the death rate. And then here you see the concentrations, tri-state area, Boston. Looks like, Florida even, huh? Well, what happened there? Loading. Coming back down for my US map. Here we go. A little bit in Florida, Southern California, Bay Area, Seattle. It's pretty much, if you're in Wyoming or Montana, it doesn't look quite as bad. But, it's coming. Because look, it's already in Utah, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma. Those are not exactly, international travel centers. And this is what just, what happens. It's the irony is that the Trump administration and sort of Trump supporters, at least in my family, always complain about open borders between European countries. We as Americans have 50 states where we have open borders. Most of our states are bigger than many European countries. So this is what happens. This is the trade-off when you have freedom of travel, right? And when you also don't have guidelines about whether people should or are allowed to travel interstate. Let's see. Okay. So I think that was that one. Let me stop sharing that screen. Just check out the chat, see if there's anything that I missed. Across Canada is saying Canada is not accurate because there's no testing there. Vaughn is in line to get tested. Then there's also a question of reinfection and whether or not you can get it more than once. Yeah. Hey, Rock. Welcome back. Hey, Itachi, a member has joined the room. I'm going to give the member data gong. Welcome, Itachi. Thank you for being a member of the channel, supporting our content and our little effort here. Hitachi's point is that most European countries pretty much have closed, which is true. Like I live in Switzerland now, and I think there are 5 border crossings to Germany, and 4 are closed, and 1 you have to have a letter showing that you have like essential business or whatever. So probably travel between the states and the US is probably less controlled right now than travel between European countries. Oh, Hitachi says he's been here from the start. I'm sorry, I must have missed you. I was sharing my screen, Hitachi, but I'll give you another gong just because I like it. All right, here we go. Let's go to the next chart. Let's see. Okay. We can look at the daily growth rate of a few countries in this next chart. So this is from worldometers.info. And if you look here in the US, we had 15,000 deaths in total. It grew by 2,000 yesterday. There were 32,000 new cases. And so our total right now is about 434,000. Of those, there are 9,000 that are in serious or critical condition. So if you say it's a 1 to 2% fatality rate, that's another 1 to 2,000 people roughly that will probably expire as a result of this. And then in terms of deaths per million, we are currently only at 45, where the greatest is Spain, that has 316 deaths per million. Italy, that has 292. So 316 deaths per million, Jesus. Like if you assume, if US had Spanish numbers, we would have probably 7 times more deaths than we are currently experiencing. So we would have already have been up to our 14,000th death if we were suffering fatalities at the same rate as Spain. So if you look at Spain, you can see they have come off their peak. But what happens with this disease is it's not like you hit your peak and it's this like amazing roller coaster ride down where you really don't have any issues, and it's just sort of like in the past. Like right now, their peak was 8,000 daily cases, and now they're at 6,000. So they're kind of like, they're just stubbornly sticking around 6,000 daily cases. So we should just kind of mentally prepare ourselves for the reality that even once we come off our peak, we may still be. Now let's look at the exact US data. So just to give you an order of magnitude. So let's look at USA daily cases. So our peak was around 30,000. Now, if we look like Spain, we may then bring it down to say 20 to 25,000. But 25,000 cases per day in the US, which would be our off-peak potential level for who knows how long, maybe several weeks or more, that would mean 200 people to 400 people dying every day. Oh, what's up with this? Jeanette Waverly with the super chat. Thank you, Jeanette. Appreciate it. So yeah, that's the thing I think people need to keep in mind. Like, yes, we have to bend the curve, but it's not like the curve gets bent straight down. It's more like a like a hanger, like a clothes hanger, a metal clothes hanger, where it just kind of like stubbornly, drags along. We can look at what would be a country where we say, oh, you know what, those guys have done a pretty good job. Like everybody talks about South Korea. We're not going to look at China's numbers because they're kind of, who knows how trustworthy they are. But the South Koreans, let's just assume that they're reporting as best they can. And you see their daily cases went from, sorry for these gigantic banner ads. You see their daily cases went from 851 to now around 50. So they got to about, 10% of their kind of hotspot. And that would mean for US, if we were like South Korea, who's done a pretty bang up job, then we would be experiencing 10% of 30,000 cases a day. So we would still have 3,000 new cases a day, which would mean 30 to 60 people dying per day. So, but that's the goal. That's the goal. The goal, and maybe we should also look at South Korea. I keep jumping back and forth. We should see how long did it take them to get to that point. So if we go back to South Korea, for South Korea, they were peaking in late Feb, early March, and they've gotten down to this, call it 50 level now, early April. So it basically took them all of March to really wrestle this thing to the ground. So about, 4 weeks of pretty heavy lockdown. And so for us who are watching from America, we look like, well, we're just getting to our peak. We're just at our peak now. So it may not really, we may not get to the South Korean level until probably early May. And that would assume that we have the same kind of hardcore mitigations that the South Koreans did, and which I'm not sure that we do. I'm not sure that we are doing the same thing as the South Koreans. Let's take a look here. South Korea coronavirus mitigation strategy. Okay. So let's take a look at this article together. Here. So what did they do? They did the broad testing. So they did mega testing, and then, they tested almost 500,000 people. And how many has the US tested? Yeah, so they tested 440,000 people. And let's see. South Korea coronavirus. Why don't we see coronavirus testing per capita? Sorry, guys, I'm looking at this in the real time. So, here's a cool chart. So here, here we see the US has done 2 million tests, and South Korea did 450,000. So then the question is, what is the population of South Korea? It's 50 million. And I think US is around 300 million. So if we did 6 times as many tests as the South Koreans, we would have 3 million tests. So we're behind. We're behind the South Koreans on the testing. We should be at around 3 million if we wanted to match the South Korean kind of testing numbers. You look at Italy, who we noticed was also pretty good about flattening their curve. Italian population. They have 60 million people, so also about, a fifth of us. And they did 800,000 tests, so, we would need to do 4 million to kind of match those Italian numbers. So we're a little behind on the testing. We'll get into that. But yeah, so TLDR is, if you look at South Korea, it took them a month to really get it down. Part of it sounds like they did some pretty aggressive testing. What else did the South Koreans do other than do a lot of tests? Let's see. South Korean mitigation strategy. I don't know what this source is. I'm not going to show you guys sources I'm not familiar with. All right, here's one, Forbes. Okay. Let's look at what these South Koreans are up to. And the Singaporeans. So here, how South Korea and Singapore deal with the coronavirus. So you've got the draconian measures of China to lock down Hubei. South Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan have come up as success stories. Singapore banned flights from China, was one of the first to do so, along with Taiwan. Even Singapore and China did it. Singapore and Taiwan banned flights from China even before the WHO said that it was necessary. I guess the Singaporeans have a memory of SARS, and they remember how intense that was. They also only have a mortality rate of 0.3%, these Singaporeans. So what have they done? Whole government, whole country approach. Well, that's kind of Singapore's way. So they had, sounds like a unified effort between their, what we would call their federal, arm for healthcare and the local police. They use their Ministry of Transportation for logistics, Ministry of Communications for centralized and rapid sharing of information via billboards, TV, social media ads. The Ministry of Education did online education. They did random health checks. They were allowed to go to work. Restaurant and bars are open, but not crowded. So they do the social distancing thing pretty heavy. And they test people everywhere. So the U.S. approach is to only test in a hot zone, or if you're a medical professional, if you have underlying conditions. The Singaporean sounds like they test anyone that has flu-like symptoms. And then if you do test positive, you have to provide names of people close to them and they need to get tested, including family members and work colleagues. Anywhere they have gone, we follow them to test the people they have come in contact with to get them all isolated. Yeah. Everyone has a fever, has to stay home for 5 days, suspended mass gatherings for months ago, including religious gatherings. Yeah, so that's the Singaporean way. Basically, some hardcore testing, hardcore tracing, but interestingly enough, did not shut down all the schools and restaurants. I think maybe now they might have shut the schools down. But anyway, let's move on to some more charts. All right, let's see. Did I show you everything I want to show you on this one? I think so. Okay, moving on. Okay, let's look at betting odds. What do the gamblers think is going to be the extent of this crisis? Oh, Serja is saying, hey, Singapore is now experiencing their second wave. I believe that is true. I believe I've heard that. And I think part of it is because the Singaporeans had, I believe, had overseas Singaporeans come back to the country, and they may have brought some of that with them. But let me see if I can pull up the Singapore data so we can see, even though they've done a pretty good job, what the second wave looks like. Ooh, yeah, look at this. Look at this. So, you know, as much as we like to praise Singapore, so we can see how they had it pretty well in control in February and even into early March, but now not so much. Those are the new daily cases, active cases, total deaths. Death rate is still pretty low, so that's pretty good. So I think their healthcare system must be decent. Maybe they have decent supply of ventilators and such. I would not be surprised. The Singaporeans, you know, they're like the Swiss of Asia. They like to prepare for stuff. Okay, now let's go on to betting odds. What do the gamblers think? We turn off notifications. Okay. All right. So the gamblers, let me refresh this in case the odds have changed, which they have. So what are they predicting at the end of this month? Most of them, okay, here's the good news. Most gamblers believe that we will have less than 5 million cases worldwide. And as a reminder, right now, we have 1.6 million cases. So the gamblers are not anticipating that we will grow by more than 3x where we are today. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but you know, it's better than the gamblers thinking that we would grow, you know, 5 to 10x. There's a 23% chance that, according to the gambling odds, that we will grow from 1.5 million to 10 million. And then a 10% chance that we would go over 5 million, but less than 10 million. So most likely we should be under 5 million cases and just have 3 times as many infected people in a few weeks as I guess 3 weeks as we do today. So still pretty nutso that it would triple in 3 weeks, but that's what the gamblers think. And then if you look at what they think is going to happen in the US, as a reminder, currently the number of cases in the US is about 500,000. And the gamblers are saying most likely we will still be under 1 million by next week. So this is by April 15th. Very small chance that we'll be over the 1 million mark. So, you know, that's kind of good news. And then if you look at recession, Basically, we will definitely be in a recession this year, which is not shocking given that the whole darn economy is on pause. And while we're here, I can't help but click on this VP pick. Who do the gamblers think will be VP? Kamala Harris. Wow. Okay. She's the blue line. And Klob used to be a 1 in 4 chance. Now she's looks like a 1 in 7, ish chance. 1 in 6 to 7. And then Whitmer from Michigan. Stacey Abrams was also talked about, but she's really come down. Now she's only 6% chance. And then Warren, less than 10% chance. Where the heck is Whitmer? Oh, Whitmer is this brownish looking thing. And that's a 13% chance. So, wow. Kamala Harris. Not sure how I feel about that. This is not the Nerds for Yang 2020 discussion show, although this is definitely something we're going to talk about on this channel. So if you want me to talk more about politics and stuff, feel free to like and subscribe, because I will be talking a lot about that from now probably till a long, long time. All right, so that was the betting odds. Now let's look at what flattened curves look like across multiple countries on the same screen. So let me quickly show you. This is a New York Times piece. And what you see here is you got a nice looking chart. Again, this is grain of salt if you believe the data from these countries. You see China really dropping it down. Although having a little bit of a spike here. God knows what's going on. Hopefully this isn't one of those things that's just like whack-a-mole. Italy has come off its peak, but this is not a fast downward sloping curve. And then US, we're still climbing the mountain. We're not on the other side of it yet. And then if you look here at other countries, Spain, Italy definitely has come off its peak. Germany, decent. Everybody's still early days. You can't look at one of these. Look at the Iran death rate, looks a little bit more encouraging. But you can't look at any of these countries and say, wow, they're out of the woods. Switzerland. Switzerland seems to have flattened and actually brought it down a bit. I can tell you I live in Switzerland, and what they're doing is they've shut down all but essential businesses. So basically just groceries and pharmacies are open and restaurants for takeout. But it's funny, my brother, who's a bit of a prepper and is very, in my opinion, kind of alarmist about this corona stuff, still went to Best Buy last week because he needed a printer. So that's the difference. Like, there's no way the equivalent of a Best Buy would be open in Switzerland. But, every country's handling it different. And then you look at this, like Pakistan, if you were in Pakistan, you would think they had it under control. And then, bam, a second wave. That's the risk. Look at Denmark. You would think Denmark had it under control here. And then, bam, Japan, off the peak, bam. So, guys, if you're listening, as soon as you start seeing those US numbers come off their peak, don't assume that we're out of the woods, because it looks like many countries have this little resurgence. Qatar, oh yeah, off the peak, boom, another one. So, Jesus, look at Kuwait, off the peak, Everything's great. Boom, off the peak. Things are getting better. Boom. So, yeah. Gosh. What country has the best looking chart so far? I would have to say it would be the South Koreans. Look at that. That's what you want it to look like. So massive. Actually, we should go back to that article where we talk about what South Koreans did, because the Singaporeans, they had a little bit of a surge. Let's look at what the Singaporeans did. I mean, sorry, what the South Koreans did. Hold on. We'll go back to the South Koreans now, because they do have the nicest looking chart. So what is the South Korean formula? Okay, so they knew of this thing because they apparently there was a religious group that traveled to Wuhan to purposely infect themselves. Jesus. The government tracked them down. The sex leader apologized, and then public health officials were able to contain and mitigate spread. Can you imagine some religious leader saying, yeah, let's all go to Wuhan to purposely infect ourselves? Like, whoa, why would you do that? It's just not scientifically sound behavior. Anyway, so then they prepared hospitals for the surge. By the time you detect the virus in someone, it was something they caught a week prior. So the spreading is a week old. You have to do something that prevents infections next week, not last week. So they, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Detect cases early, because it's harder to contain a big number of cases, according to Vernon Lee. This is a Singaporean, but where's the South Koreans? This article is kind of lame. Okay. Here we go. The South Korean model is an invasive Big Brother approach, easier applied in local hotspots rather than in large states. Public awareness of the disease in South Korea pushed more people to get tested. If they tested positive, it did not mean they got sick, but they were tracked and quarantined so as not to infect others asymptomatically. They did more screenings than any other country at a rate of 10,000 per day. Okay. That's an interesting sneeze. This guy's quite powerful. Think that means he's got 5 meters of reach. It's probably saying a woman wearing a face mask as opposed to showing preventative measures. That's another thing. Remember, the U.S. guidance was that face masks were not useful and not necessary. That was a load of malarkey. At any rate, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that the South Koreans have any special formula other than just testing and covering people down and isolating. So, at any rate, okay. Let's see here. Oh, my chats have stopped refreshing. So I'm going to quickly go and open another window so I can keep track of our conversation before I go on to my next chart. Let's see here. Pop out chat. There we go. Actually, I don't want to pop it out. Oh, now it's done. Okay. All right. So that's the beautiful South Korean chart. Let's just take another look at their chart, man. That's what we want. We want this chart. That's what we want. That is not what we have now. Most of the world does not look like that. Most of the world looks like everybody's just climbing or getting the whack-a-mole bump. Either way, early days on this one. All right. Now, let's look at certain states of the U.S. And see how like New York, Kansas, California, those guys are doing. Let's go back here. So if we go to the U.S., we've got the most cases in New York, New Jersey. Oh, Michigan popped up to number 3 now. California, Louisiana, Pennsylvania. Those are some of your hotspots. And in terms of new cases per day, similar list. Yeah, New York is still having the most growth. Then New Jersey, and then Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Michigan. Total deaths is New York is at 7,000. They added about 800 yesterday. So they probably will be hitting 10,000 deaths in New York in a few days. Now, if you look at the total cases per million people, New York, New Jersey, Louisiana are the most hit. But there's some other states that aren't getting talked about that have pretty high levels of cases per million. Like as an example, the people with the least cases per million are Puerto Rico, Minnesota, West Virginia, a couple hundred. But like Massachusetts, Connecticut, DC, Michigan, Rhode Island, these are over 1,000. In the 2,000 and up range. And then if you look at the so anyway, that's the state by state breakdown. Someone was asking about Kansas before. Let's see what Kansas looks like. Kansas, 300 cases per million is well below average. So looking good so far in Kansas. All right, so that's the U.S. stuff. Next thing I want to show you guys. Ooh, yeah. I've got some more, some interesting charts on growth by metropolitan area over time. And then I have some projections on hospital beds required by state, ICU beds required, and ventilators required. And we can look at it per state. Before I do that, let me take a sip. Let me just take a second to thank some of our members who've been supporting the channel, and then we'll get back to our charts. So let's see here. See all. So we'll start with our executive vice president level. Oh, we have 2 now. We have Kristen Slevin, the original, and Surin Maz. So thank you. Thank you, Kristen and Surin. Well, I'll just drop my little bell thing. All right, then we have the vice president level. Emily Kingsley, Chris Chan, Fat Lamb, JM Sap, VLAM, Lock Win. So thank you guys for your support. And then we have our hardcore nerds. Amanda, Landline, DK, Tracy, David, Adrian, Gene, Chad, Mike, Ming. Hardcore in the house. And then we have Verified, the entry level, but still valuable nonetheless. Soldier 1, Chris, David, Emerald, Mercy Ann, Miles, Verily, Doris, Albert, Shake and Make, Mick, Sophia, Carlos, Jadwiga, Gail, James, Hitachi, Your Moment, Peter, Arez, Albert, Brandon, Yes, Sugar, Brian, Lisa, Sydney. Sydney's our first member ever. Okay, so thanks everybody for being a member. If you want to join, there should be a join button on the YouTube channel. And the money goes to a couple things like my webcam broke, so I'm using the built-in MacBook webcam. So I'm not coming in as crisp as normal, but I had to buy a new webcam, which cost me a couple $100. So the membership money goes towards things like that. And someday maybe I'll get a green screen and, boost some other things, and then also promote the channel. Oh, speaking of which, I gotta tell you guys, I have booked a very, very cool guest. If you're into politics, this is a guest that you're gonna find super interesting, partly because this guest, I don't want to give it away, but this guest has worked in the Trump administration. So it's still in the scheduling stages. We have a date. There's a 50% chance a week before, a few days before, I'm going to get an email saying, oh, so-and-so can't make it, blah, blah, blah. So we'll see. But it should be a cool conversation. And if you want to make sure you get that interview, make sure you subscribe now, because I don't think we're going to do it live. Unfortunately. I think we thought it might be better to kind of have it more kind of low-key conversational. So at any rate, stay tuned for that one. That will be coming hopefully in maybe early May. All right, let's move on. So I was going to tell you about the hold on. I was going to tell you about the growth by metropolitan area. So let's do that. I think it was this guy. Is it this guy? Yeah. Okay, this is a chart of the daily change in total cases over the previous 7 days. Basically, New York has about a 30% growth rate over the previous 7 days. But you see at one point, who the hell is this blue? Wow, Jesus. Detroit was growing 100% over its previous 7 days. And now, thank goodness, they're still growing pretty high, 30% over previous 7 days. But you gotta like the general direction of these trends, that cities are taking it serious. So like San Fran, Seattle are examples of American cities who've really said hell no and really kind of shut things down. New Orleans, obviously they had the Mardi Gras thing, but in hindsight's 2020. And Detroit, yeah, they were really kind of growing like nuts, but they've really come down, and so has New York. So kudos to them. This looks at which states are having the highest death per thousand. You see they basically tie into where the hotspots are: New York, New Orleans, Seattle area. And then this is death per thousand globally in metro area. You see the northern region of Italy has 0.5 deaths per thousand, which is about 13 times or 14 times higher than New York. So if New York had the same death rate as the northern Italy, they would be up to like 5,000 deaths already, easily, and probably 7,000. So getting that infection rate down is important, but also getting that fatality rate down is crucial. I mean, if you were looking at like, look at this, like Bellingham, Washington, only 0.2 deaths per thousand. So this is great. I mean, I think, you got to give credit to at least the intensive care capabilities that we've had so far when we have capacity. Let's see if there's anything else on this one I wanted to share. I think that was it. Yeah. What's this one? This one is the confirmed cases per 1,000 people also coming down. So this is to basically normalize for population. And you see, yeah, it was terrible in Detroit, but came down. Everybody's coming down pretty okay. Seattle's really handled this well as sort of ground zero. They actually have the lowest cases per 1,000 people of any major U.S. metropolitan area. So kudos to Governor Inslee and the mayor of Seattle for really grabbing this one by the horns. All right. So I think, guys, this is where there's like some hope, right? There's some hope in that we are seeing the curves coming down. Now, let's look at hospital capacity. So part of dealing with this is not only keeping the infection rate down, but it's getting that death rate per 1,000 people down. And how do you do that? Well, you got to have great healthcare. So let's look at the capacity of our healthcare system by state. So obviously we'll start with New York. Everybody talks about New York. So let's look at New York, kind of like the worst scenario. And here you have about 13,000 beds available. And it could be that by April 7th, we had projected even more in the worst case scenario, which is this dotted line. And then you have it coming down from April 7th all the way until really coming down quite dramatically in May. And then if you look at a different projection, which is the COVID Act Now, and they update their models on a pretty frequent basis. So let's take a look at that one. So if you go to New York here, so New York is looking really good right now. So these are models that are updated every 24 hours based on the latest data that we have available to us. And let's be fair, I think the models have become a little bit more optimistic. And right now, this is the dotted line on how many we might we expect beds to be available and how much we need given the New York lockdown. And we're good. We have enough. In fact, if we do the strict 3-month stay at home, we might peak in mid-May, according to this model, and still be under the beds that we have in New York. So that's fantastic. If you look at New Orleans, do they have New Orleans? Maybe Orleans Parish. Oh, okay. This one's not looking as good. This one is saying that right now there are 1,500 hospitalizations. They have 1,600 beds. And depending on how successful the stay-at-home orders are, they could peak at around 2,100 hospitalizations, but only having 1,600 beds. So New Orleans is looking less encouraging, but that is the reality of the numbers. So what they're saying on covidactnow.org is stay at home, eliminate all means of possible infection, encourage policymakers to do more, like surge probably the hospital capacity, or maybe they have to move some patients out of Louisiana. Well, what about Louisiana as a state? Maybe that was just New Orleans. Let's see. Yeah, Louisiana is looking much better. So they're probably going to have to move people out of the New Orleans metro area into other parts of Louisiana. So the dotted line is the number of beds they have, well below if they do the strict stay-at-home. If they do a lax stay-at-home, then they could get a over capacity. That's this orange. But if they do a really good stay-at-home and everybody honors it, they should be really in great shape in Louisiana. And then we could do California. California is, here they are today, well above demand, plenty of capacity. If they do lax stay-at-home, like poorly executed, then they could exceed capacity in late May. And it would peak around July 4th weekend at 173,000 hospitalizations for 70,000 beds. But if they have strict stay-at-home, they can probably stay under that dotted line, no problem. So basically, the big TLDR is like there's strict and there's lax. You don't want to be lax. If you're lax and you go over that dotted line, you're in big trouble. And then someone was asking me about Kansas earlier. Take a look at Kansas. Kansas is looking great so long as people honor the stay at home. If they do this, which is the lax, then yeah, then they'll exceed capacity in about 8 weeks. So I know it sucks to stay at home. Just do your best. It's crazy. Now, this is a chart of the whole country, and the color represents where you may be most likely to see a hospital overload. So if you live in one of the gray areas, you're great. If you're in a green area, unlikely to see an overload. If you're in an orange or red area, you're likely going to have problems unless everyone locks down, shelters in place, minimizes the infection rate, combined with massive government coordination and leadership to grow the capacity. So let's take a look at this map. Like, where are we talking about are the most problem areas? So obviously, New Jersey and New York, bad. That's red. Southern part of Florida, red. We talked about New Orleans. That's interesting. Arizona. Wow, I didn't know Arizona was in the red. And then you've got parts of Washington State, and then good chunks of South Dakota as well. That's interesting. If you look at South Dakota, here they are today. They look fine, but I think the problem is they don't have that many hospital beds. So they only have 2,800 beds. And if they just do social distancing, they may hit 13,000 hospitalizations for 2,800 beds. So yeah, what is South Dakota doing? Oh, so they're just encouraging social distance. Yeah, that's probably not going to be sufficient. So if you live in South Dakota, and you should probably insist that your governor, like, I was going to say, put on some big person pants and avoid crossing the dotted line. And in order to do that, you have to act according to this model between April 22nd and April 27th. And then if you do that, if you take action around here, you're going to avoid this. So that's South Dakota. Who else is in the red? I was surprised that Arizona was in the red. Okay, Arizona as a state is looking fine. There's probably, oh no. Well, what is their current policy? Well, they are doing stay at home. So if they have lax stay at home, then they're kind of screwed. They'll have 32,000 hospitalizations with only 13,000 beds. But if they do hardcore stay at home and really tamp it down, like don't go to Best Buy and hang out in line and everything like that, then you'll be all right. You'll be all right. Okay, so I think we've talked enough about those. I wanted to show you one other thing, which is the U.S. Projections, like as a country. All right. This is kind of interesting. This model, this is a different model. This is not the COVID Act now. This one is from covid19.healthdata.org. And it basically shows the number of beds needed over time. So we might peak in, just a few days. Wow, next week's going to be pretty intense. And then you'd have, this is all your beds. This is the ICU beds. And this is the ventilator. So, the question is, what we don't know is, they're saying here, we might need 94,000 beds in America, and we might be short. And then same with ICU beds needed versus what we have. So, this goes to a little bit of a political rant, which is like, what is the president's plan? Like, I know he does a daily briefing, but like, what's the plan? This will now take me to my customary petition encouragement. So if you go to tinyurl, where is it? Oh man, you would think I'd have it saved. Oh, here we go. tinyurl.com/3-questions. I'll show it to you. I've been trying to get the press to just ask him 3 simple questions. By the way, we have, yeah, we're almost going to get to 500 signatures. That's cool. So the questions that I want him to answer is, what is our national ICU and ventilator capacity right now? And please give like a precise number. What do we project the demand will be in the next 6 weeks, given the mitigation plans that the states have implemented? And give a range, right? Don't just say, who knows, we'll see what happens. No. Just use numbers. You say you went to Wharton, you should know how to use numbers. And then the third thing is, then how do we reconcile number 1 and number 2? And can you name specific actions and milestones with dates to show how we can close that gap? Don't just talk about, nobody does more tests than us, or nobody, today we shipped, hundreds of ventilators to New York. Like, it's not really useful to have that kind of a daily briefing if we don't know what the goal is, like what's the big picture. So if you agree that we want answers, go to tinyurl.com/3-questions. I would very much appreciate your support because I'm just trying to keep, obviously I don't expect Trump to answer our question, our petition, But I think if we can get the media to cover it and every day just ask him, what do we have? What will we need? What are we going to do to close the gap? Exactly what do we have? Exactly what will we need? Exactly what are we doing to close that gap and when? You know, this is not like rocket science. He should be able to handle that kind of question. I don't understand why he's just like talking about, you know, malaria medication and stuff. Anyway, okay, let's move on. Ooh, okay, I do have more stuff, but I need to get a refill because I'm about to lose my voice. I've been talking for an hour. So with your permission, I am going to why don't I let you look at that petition again to encourage you while I'm getting my warm beverage. Why don't you go ahead and sign that petition and share it, and also like this stream so that more people can discover this nerd content. Okay, so I'll be right back in a second. But yeah, maybe who knows? Maybe by the time I come back, that 406 will say like 425 or something. All right, I'll be right back. Give me like 1 minute. All right. Let's see. We're at 406 when I left. Let's refresh. Come on. Did anybody sign? Oh no, it's gonna slowly creep up. This silly change.org does this like dramatic reveal. We're at 406 before we took our little intermission. 401, 2, 3, 5, 6. Come on. Oh, dudes. Ah, there we go. I'll gong. Oh, yeah, baby. Love it. Got to 412. So thank you, everybody. The 6 of you who so kindly signed the petition. Please consider sharing it. You know, like whether you love Trump or hate Trump, dude has to give clear answers in a time of crisis. And I'll be honest, I do not love him, but I just want answers, man. Just act like a president. Okay, now let's move on. And Caleb says he signed. Carbonate signed. Love it. Love it. What are we signing? I'll do it. All right. What you need to do, Caro, is you go to tinyurl.com/3questions. It's a change.org petition. Okay. All right. Now let's move on to the next chart. Oh, this is great. So this is an article about how we know when we can all kind of start going back to quote unquote normal. Like what should be the mile markers for when we can kind of get out of this wartime mode. So let's see. What do experts think? So, let's see. Okay, this is a report by Scott Gottlieb, blah, 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 by a bunch of people. Let's take a look. Let's see what this report's all about before we get into the summary. Here it is. This is a report by a bunch of PhDs, lawyer, masters in public health, and doctor. American Enterprise Institute. Okay, it's a pretty legit organization, I would say. So they did this roadmap to reopening. And now let's go back to the news article that conveniently summarized the takeaways for us. What do they think we need to do? First, the hospitals have to be able to safely treat all patients requiring hospitalization without resorting to crisis standards of care. So this is probably the most important one, which is, if your hospitals are overflowing. Oh, well, you guys are saying the tinyurl thing doesn't work? Oh, let me check. Hold on. tinyurl/3-questions. Oh, it works for me. So here it is again. It should work for you guys. Anyway, so the point is, like, if your hospital can't handle the current crush of patients, like if you're in New York City, then the last thing you want to do is say, okay, everybody go back to work, back to normal, right? So that's obvious. Seems like very sensible. So the first thing we should do is wait till our hospital utilization is closer to 80, 85%, I would imagine, and where you're not having like field hospitals and hotels and tents and things like that. The next thing you want to know is you want to know a state is able to test everyone who has symptoms. So I think this is kind of like that South Korea model, right? Where, I know the president has said in the past that anybody who wants a test can get a test. I think he was being quite cunning, because at that time, the US guidelines for getting a test were like you had to be showing symptoms or be in a high-risk group. But I think what the American Enterprise Institute and the South Koreans are saying is like, no. You should test everybody that has like even flu-like symptoms as early as you can to kind of get in front of it. And you want to be doing about 750,000 tests a week in America. This is viewed as a reasonable expectation for when we haven't been having any major pockets or regional outbreaks. So the question is, like, currently, how many coronavirus tests per week in USA? Looks like right now, it's hard to get this number. Oh, we're about 100,000 tests per day. Okay, so that's good. At least according to USA Today. Let me just show you the tab. So right now, we're at about 100,000 a day. Many are denied tests or must wait several days for results. So there's a big backlog. But, the number is about 100,000 a day right now, which is great because that would put us at 700,000 a week, which then, according to, if you believe the AEI, the American Enterprise Institute, would put us just under 750,000 a week. So we're under where we want to be, but we're getting closer. Of course, the question for the retrospective will be like, why? I mean, if we shut down flights to China in the end of Jan, and here we are in early April, and we're still trying to catch up with our testing backlog, like you wonder, like, what the hell happened there? Which we will get into momentarily. So you want to be, so again, just to recap, you want hospitals that can handle all patients without resorting to crisis standards. Then you want to be at about 750,000 tests a week. There will be times where we need more than 750,000 a week, but let's get to 750,000 a week. And then the state is able to conduct monitoring of confirmed cases and contacts. So a robust system of contact tracing and isolation. So I actually have in-laws in Singapore, and that they are pretty hardcore. Like when they order you to isolate, like they do these random checks. You have to install this app and you have to do a live video of your surroundings if they require it. They actually come and knock on your door at random. Like it's sort of like almost like an IRS audit. And then if you're caught like jumping isolation, like it's a $10,000 fine or something. Obviously, that's not the American way. But I guess what they're saying here is they want really strong monitoring and confirmed cases. Other countries have relied on cell phone tracking. We don't have anything like that, and not clear that we'd be okay with it for privacy reasons. So I'm not sure how we're going to do it, but they're saying we need more monitoring of confirmed cases and contacts. And then you'll want to see a sustained reduction in cases for at least 14 days. So the number 2, and I guess this one's number 4, go together. You got to be testing a lot, and then you want to see still a reduction in cases despite a lot of aggressive testing. And so we were looking at charts where we're like, hey, look, it's down. But those charts where it came down, other than like South Korea, they were only coming down for a few days or a week. They want to see a sustained reduction for 2 weeks. Okay. And I think if you have all 4 of those things, you're good to go. Then you can go back to this wonderful Times Square celebration. So in summary, if you believe the American Enterprise Institute, as summarized by the New York Times, you want hospitals that can handle patients. You want about a little under 1 million tests a week. And you want some way of contact tracing and enforcing lockdown isolation. If you do that, then there's a path. But here's an example where you wonder, like, if we have a presidential daily briefing, like, why isn't there a freaking plan? Why do I have to read this from the American Enterprise Institute? Why isn't Fauci and Birx and Trump and Pence and Jared, that brain trust? Here's the plan. This is what we need. This is what we have. This is how we're going to get what we need. This is how we transition to a more normal situation. These are the metrics we're going to be looking at. We want, this many cases per day, reducing at this % per day. We want to have our supply exceed our demand for this many days or this % utilization. And we want to implement these contact tracing things. Like, just say it. Have a plan. All right. That's another, you know about the petition, guys. So go ahead, check it out. All right. Let's move on to the next chart. Ooh. Oh, this is not a chart as much as an interesting debate I had with someone on Twitter. And I just thought it was really interesting. So I'm going to share it with you. So what I said on March 31st, so that was about a little over almost 10 days ago, was I said, hey, man, when we do our retrospective or after action report, post-mortem, whatever term you want to use, I would imagine that we're going to say we started testing way too late, right? The rest of the world was using these WHO-approved German kind of testing protocol. And the US, as is our custom, decided to develop our own tests. And as Fauci mentioned, our own test turned out to be kind of faulty and were taking very long. And probably we gave up several weeks of knowing how bad things were. And then now you look at those charts we were looking at before, and like the whole country's like blots of red everywhere. You probably would have known that was coming if we had tested earlier. So I think number one is like, well, yes, I know it's American tradition not to trust other tests. If you insist on doing your own test, then what I would have said if I were president, I would have said to the CDC, like, okay, so let me get this straight. The WHO has declared a state of emergency. We are shutting down inbound travel from China. We're seeing this starting to grow exponentially, at least in other countries. Now, you want to develop your own tests. Okay, so first question, why are you developing your own tests? And maybe they say, wow, we don't know. These German tests are terrible. They're not known for precision. Not like American tests. Okay, then I would say, okay, when is this American test going to be ready? And they would say, oh, 1 week, no problem. Then I would say, all right, well, what are the milestones that are leading up to that 1 week? And how will I know that we're on track? And then what would have happened was probably we would have missed those milestones. And by day 6 or 7, I would probably say, well, hey, you told me the American test should be ready by now. What's our plan B? And why won't we use the German test in the meantime? And worst case scenario, we have too many tests. Instead, I think what we did was we kept trying to get the US test working, and now finally they're working. But it took weeks, right? It took weeks to get there. So one takeaway is like we probably should have tested way earlier. And then the second one is we probably should have blocked international travel overall, not just from China, because by the time we had blocked it from China, that the horse was out of the stable. There were cases in Milan, in Tokyo, in Seoul, in Singapore and Hong Kong. I mean, all over Spain. So UK. So just saying like no China flights is like really, really naive because the damn virus was already out. Anyway, this is sort of like the build that wall approach, which is like, oh, don't worry, it's only the Chinese flights. We've stopped those. I've led. And the reality is that the virus doesn't really care about your passport. Okay, so that was number 2. And then number 3 was we probably should have used the DPA to accelerate ventilator and PPE manufacturing in February and not in the end of March. I know that Trump said, oh, I didn't have to use it. Companies were listening. But if you look at the states, they're running out of like masks, and they're telling citizens to like use your own mask, but don't use a medical grade one because we don't have enough. Which shouts to me like, well, shoot, we probably should have done something in February to basically insist in hitting some. This is why having numbers and having plans would have been helpful. And my fourth takeaway is that the lack of this testing and containment and treatment capacity in Feb will probably lead to trillions of dollars of extended negative economic impact and probably tens of thousands of deaths in May and June. And then lastly, I did this in a previous live stream, so I won't go over it in detail with you guys again. But, you know, when you say things like everything's fine, and you say we have a small number of people in the country, it's 12 people. Many of them are already getting better and fully recovered. And you say it's totally under control and that everyone should go to church on Easter Sunday and it's going to be beautiful and we have it shut down from China. Like, you know, it just shows that you're not really thinking straight. Even in as late as March, he was saying, oh, it's the Obama administration, it's their fault, or I don't want the Grand Princess cruise passengers to come onto land because I don't want to double my numbers. You know, anyone who wants a test can get a test. This is just craziness. So at any rate, but let me go into the debate I had with someone on Twitter, because it was actually interesting. We had a very very constructive conversation, but it did show like very strong different points of view. So then Mr. Bond says, hey, point one, which is my point saying that, hey, we didn't test early enough. We should have tested using the German test. He says, hey, you know, Dr. Fauci explains the delay in testing. So I went to that link that he shared, and I'll share it with you guys now. And basically, that article says that, and this is from The Hill, that article, so what Fauci told Hugh Hewitt on the Hugh Hewitt show is that a technical glitch resulted in the delay in production of usable tests in the US. It was a complicated series of multiple things that conflated that just went wrong. One of them was a technical glitch. Nobody's fault. There's no bad guys here. This is what just happened, right? So I've dug a little bit into this, and as we've just discussed, yeah, the US test did have multiple delays. But then as a leader, you always have to have a plan B, in my opinion. So just saying like, hey, don't blame Trump, the delays were unexpected, is like, I mean, come on, man. Anybody who works in any complex organization knows like nothing happens according to plan. You should always have a plan B. And I'm sure a lot of folks in the military know that better than most. Like, you know, any great plan does not survive first contact with the enemy, right? So, you know, assuming that the CDC's test is going to work on the first go, like, I wouldn't do that. Point two, when he blocked travel from China, he was called hysterical and xenophobic. What would you guys have called him if he closed internationally? And so then what I said was like, what did I say? Oh, whoops. Hold on. I replied somewhere here. Okay, so I rebutted. And I said, all right, well, point one, the rest of the world was testing using the WHO tests. Folks in Seattle were not even allowed at UW to use their own tests or the German-made ones because the CDC wouldn't let them. And on point two, which is like, oh, you call him xenophobic. What would you have done if he shut down flights internationally? I said, well, since when should Trump care about what you guys call him? He doesn't care what the Democrats call. When does Trump give a rat's butt what anyone calls him? Shouldn't he have put America first? So at any rate, so that was point two. But Mr. Bond is I like his chutzpah, and I like that he was at least kind of being constructive, saying laying out like logic. Then he says point three. So my point three, as a reminder, this is a hard thing to follow, is about the Defense Production Act, right? So then I was saying, hey, he should have ordered more PPE and ventilators in February, not end of March. So then he says on point three, using the Defense Production Act is an extremely drastic action, and if used improperly can destroy companies' lives and even be considered an abuse of power. Using that act when we didn't have all the facts would have had dire consequences for its citizens. Let's see if I can. Did I reply to this one? Okay, so then I said, wait a minute. You can't have it both ways. I said, hey, Trump used it this week on GM, and it's okay. But in Feb, it would have been an abuse of power. Like, you can't have it both ways. And then he said, no, it's not okay unless you get consent from the company owner, which is exactly what Trump did. And then I said, actually, I read the bill. The Defense Production Act says nothing about requiring company owner consent. Can you point it out for me? And then he said, well, it doesn't require it, but you shouldn't do it. So that was really interesting. And then the last thing we talked about was, I think that might have been deleted. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Because we then debated the testing capabilities. And where is it? Oh, wow. We went at it. It was great. It was a great debate. And then he says, and Trump is meant to magically fix problems he has no control over. That seems to be expecting too much. As Fauci said, this would happen to any leader. And then I said, well, other countries procured tests fine without any magic. The problem was we didn't want to use the German test, and we had to develop our own, and it took longer than we expected. And then he says, well, but we aren't going to use tests that aren't working. As we get information, we'll learn specifics they give false negatives of 40%. And I said, yeah, the US tests were crap early on, but the WHO tests were proving fine. And literally the rest of the world had been using them since January. And then he then referred me to an article about the failure rate of 40%, saying, what's the point of testing if they have a failure rate of 40%? And then pointed me to a article that claimed that the tests were really poor. And long story short, the article was number one, published by a bunch of Chinese researchers, which when I talk to my MAGA friends, they will say, I don't believe any data from China. So I was like, wow, this is weird. Like you're referencing a report that says tests are faulty. But number one, this report comes from China. Number two, it had in capital letters withdrawn. So all of the conclusions were drawn. Number three, it was saying that early Chinese tests were faulty, not the WHO German ones. So anyway, that was a really fun morning. I have to say, like, I enjoyed the back and forth with Mr. Bond. Obviously, like, he and I don't agree on most things, but at least we were able to go back and forth and keep it like it was spirited but still respectful. So that, I think that was an example of a good Twitter debate. But yeah, that is kind of crazy that you know, what I do enjoy is you know, taking the time to really get to the facts and get the data. So now moving on. Let's see. Yeah, I have an article about basically why the US chose to do its own test. I won't dwell on that. We talked about the testing enough. But basically, the CNN article says that the CDC never contacted the WHO about getting access to the tests and just immediately decided to build its own. Because on January 17th, the WHO published a protocol from German researchers with instructions necessary for any country to manufacture coronavirus tests. So I think that's one that the South Koreans and pretty much everybody's been using. And then that same day, we said, no, we're going to have our own version. It won't use any of the German protocol. And, you know, we're better, basically. And then, of course, as you know, our test didn't work. And, you know, as the WHO shipped hundreds of thousands of tests, broader U.S. testing struggled to begin. And then after the CDC tests were shipped, they weren't working as expected. So then it required them to be remanufactured. So, you know, the CDC publishes a protocol on January 17th. And then, sorry, the WHO publishes the German protocol on January 17th. And then the CDC announced that it would be shipping its tests on February 5th, which then had to be remanufactured days later. So, and then on March 1, HHS says they have launched an investigation into the manufacturing defect. And then finally, March 9th, public health labs in all states are able to test. So from when the WHO gave it in January 17th, you've got a clock ticking, right? You have the end of January and all of February. We're basically spinning our wheels. And it isn't until March 9th that all 50 states are able to test in a meaningful and reliable way. So, you know, this is where if you're going to have a task force, they got to be on top of stuff, man. And, you know, in fairness, like, this is a tough problem and we shouldn't expect perfection. But I would argue, like, if you have a pandemic, you would think testing is not like some novel idea. That testing early, testing reliably, testing at scale. And this is where, again, if we had a plan and we had milestones and we had key performance indicators like normal, complex organizational leadership, like that's what you want. You don't want like reality TV, I have more ratings than The Bachelor stuff. Like that's not really that important. Okay. So next, I want to show you a compilation video. I'm sure many of you have seen it from The Daily Show, but It's only like a minute long, but we should watch it because it just goes to show you how amazing video is at holding people accountable. And luckily, people record everything nowadays, so it's all out there. So let me share my screen and share the audio.
Absolutely falling. We are all doomed. The end is near.
Woo! My goodness. Now, that's Fox News, man. That's the #1 news source for Americans. And Sean Hannity is, I think, the #1 ratings of Fox News. So, and then Fox and Friends, also very popular. I have many MAGA members of my immediate family who are hardcore MAGA. They have that Fox News on all day long. And when I talk to them, they immediately, like, they can say the exact talking points, like down to every comma and semicolon. So, and it's amazing how they went from, oh, this is a snowflake, deep state, left-wing conspiracy because you lost the election and you lost the impeachment. And then overnight they flipped and they're like, wow, President Trump's such a wartime president. Like, he's going to save us from this, catastrophe and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I figured I'd share that with you because you got to hold these folks accountable, man. You can't talk shit like that and cause people to make personal health decisions that perhaps have accelerated the spread of this disease and just act like nothing happened. Like, it's not quite yelling fire in a crowded theater, but it is kind of like yelling no fire in a burning theater. So anyway, we'll talk more about this. And Trumper for Yang, I got you. I'm going to follow you. Sorry. Yeah, I don't have open DMs because I'm unable to reply even to the ones I get, but I will follow you so that we can talk more. And we should get you on the show, Trumper. Okay, next, let's see. I do have good news. There's a lot of, so the one thing that we don't talk about a lot is the vaccine. So there are basically over 300 clinical trials going on right now to try and see if we can at least, if not cure ourselves of this disease, treat it so that we can get that death rate down. And, of all of the things that could be a game changer, if any of these trials comes through, we could go back to normal way, way faster. Because the alternative is we don't have a vaccine and then we're in constant kind of suppression mode. And at some point, that's just probably going to get too expensive. I don't think the country can afford it. So hopefully one of these trials comes through and, there's already 17 in phase 4. Most of them are in phase 2 and 3. So some of them are pretty far along. And they're trying all kinds of things. They're trying, Trump's favorite, hydroxychloroquine. But then there's like a million other things that people are trying. And so we'll see if any of those things work. All kinds of approaches. So I just wanted to share, like, I know we talk about, wow, look, more and more people are getting it. And, we don't have enough hospitals, yada, yada. But we are working on it across the entire world. So there are actually more trials in China than the US. There's 29 in Italy. France has 29. UK has 14. Spain is 13. Canada, 12. So there's a bunch of trials going on. And I'm guessing this is a race to see who can find it. And this is one where if another country gets there before us, like, fine. Let's just all get through this together. Okay. Next. I wanted to show you a super cool data visualization. This is going to be like one of the longest streams ever, but we're getting to the end. All right. So Chris Prouse recommended this, which I totally agree with. So I just want to give a shout out to Chris. Thank you for the recommendation. And hold on. Let me share. All right. So let's start this one over. This looks at the number of deaths after the day of the first death. So we're going to watch a moving screen to show you how many deaths there were day 1, day 2, day 3, and so on. And keep your eye on the COVID-19 row. But you've got, this is some pretty, greatest hits in terms of terrible epidemics. You got Ebola, cholera, MERS, measles, meningitis, SARS, swine flu 1, swine flu 2, measles 1, measles 2. So let's see where COVID lines up, it's interesting juxtaposed to all of the Fox News stuff saying that it was just made up by the Democrats. But let's just look at it. So COVID's down here. Well, now it's down here. Not too bad. Day 19, day 20, we're looking all right. Okay, now it's starting to pick up. Now it's passing Ebola by day 32. It's in number 3. By day 35, it's in the number 2 slot. It's still not as bad as cholera from 2010. And I'm not sure. Day 54. Okay, I see that the reproductive rate of this disease is what really freaks me out. Now it's number 1 by day 70. I think that's the thing that people don't understand when they say it's just like the flu. The reproductive rate is twice as much as the flu. So anything that grows exponentially looks like this. So first 100 days, 88,000 cases. First 100 days of swine flu, 3,000. First 100 days of Ebola. Remember when Ebola was like national news? There's only 500 deaths after day 100 compared to 88,000 with COVID-19. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that one because I know there are a lot of people that are saying, oh, this is exaggerated. Oh, you guys want a link to that? Of course you can have a link to that. Let me just put that in the chat here. It's from Data is Beautiful, but it was also from a Reddit thread. So hopefully that'll work for you guys. Check it out when you get a chance. All right. I think I already showed that. I think we're good, guys. So before we wrap up, let me just share with you some of the upcoming content we've got, and then hopefully you can look forward to it. I know I am. As a reminder, we have David Kim running for Congress, big Yang Gang guy, on April 11th, which is 2 days from now. It's Saturday. We've got Tully, another Yang Ganger, on the 12th, Sunday. Roberto Blake, big YouTuber, on the 19th, and Yang Gang. We have the panel discussion, which I'm super excited about, with Heidi Briones, with Jonathan Herzog, with Jermaine Johnson, and Mike Breuer. All 4 of them on a panel with me simultaneously live. Going to be hopefully I've interviewed all of them one-on-one already, and I can tell you that these guys are smart and they are great conversationalists, and I think it'll be a really fun conversation. Then we have Blair Walsingham running for Congress in Tennessee. Then I have another audience discussion panel in early May. That'll be for priority invitations for channel members. So if you have thought about becoming a member, even if you're just the lowest level verified nerd, you can get early invitations to be a panelist. Then we have Lacey from the Yang Scream, and then also she worked on the Yang campaign on Sunday, May 3rd, and then Andrew Wan on May 9th. And then we also have our very special guest who used to work in the Trump administration, which will be super cool. So definitely. Oh, and Mindful Skeptics is reminding me, yes, I will be on the Mindful Skeptics channel on the 18th. So please check out the Mindful Skeptics podcast on YouTube. Boyce is a great guy. He was also on the audience panel just like a week ago, I think, a few days ago. Oh, Hitachi, you want more hints? All right, I'll give you a hint. Let me caveat this. What I can tell you is I have an email exchange with this person and their their like scheduling person, and we have confirmed a date. But I've also had other guests that have confirmed dates, and then like things fall through. These, especially if they're kind of higher profile, like, you know, if CNN or Fox calls them and needs them, like, I don't think Nerds for Humanity, they're not gonna be like, no, I'm sorry, I'm on the show with Tom. But with that said, assuming that the scheduling happens, another hint is that this person is well, the person worked in the Trump administration, and the person is a man. Although I know that well, probably most people in the Trump administration are men, but a white man. He's a white man that worked in the Trump administration. So that'll be the, you know, and of course, when we actually have the person on, like, you'll see, and hopefully it'll be a good conversation and the audio will work, and it won't have that crazy clicking sound that we had when Andrew had his speakerphone on, which is not his fault. I mean, very reasonable to think a speakerphone should work, but sometimes with this software, it kind of messes up. So at any rate, I will say goodnight to Lemonade Lime, a white man that worked for Trump administration. I give you one more hint. He has a law degree. So he has a law degree. He worked in the Trump administration. So that will narrow it down a little more. But we'll see. You know, it's not scheduled to happen for a few weeks, and then I'll have to edit it and then publish it. I'll probably premiere it, but I will see if I can get his permission to talk about it after we shoot, so that you guys know who's coming. All right. With that, I'm gonna wrap it up. It's been 2 wonderful hours of data with you all. Before you go, please, please, please like. There's only 4 likes. Is this crazy? Is this true? There's only 4 likes here. If you give us some likes, it increases the chances of it being recommended to other people. So we want to maximize the reach. So we have 37 likes on YouTube right now. So thank you for that. 38. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the likes. Really appreciate it. And share it out, subscribe, all that good stuff. Stay healthy, wash your hands, and we'll see you. Actually, the next one will be on Saturday, right? Yeah. Saturday will be the next one. And again, we have a nice, that'll be with David Kim. So that'll be a great conversation, and more to come after that. Goodbye, nerds. Little gong goodbye, gong you out. Let the data calm your soul.